Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, best place for long-term stock investors. Today I'll be talking about the US CHIPS Act. Now what you can expect from this video is 1, why all of this is happening. Number 2, what are the spillover effects that's going to happen as a result of this act. And number 3, how will it affect you as an investor, as a Malaysian investor specifically. Now, as a disclaimer, none of what I say should be taken as financial advice. If you need this sort of advice, please speak to a professional. What I say is purely for educational purposes. And as another disclaimer, I do own some shares mentioned in this video. Now guys, if you have not achieved your 6-figure portfolio, if not built one as of now, then I've got the perfect book for you to read. It is our free ebook, and if you're interested, go check it out and download it in the comment section or the description. Alright, so guys, let's dive into the video today. Now, just for those who are not fully aware as to what is happening, essentially President Joe Biden has decided to spend a lot of money, well, not his money, but the US government's money or the US taxpayers' money to boost the chips and semiconductor industry in the US. Total, I think it's roughly it's a 280 billion package, and 52 billion is earmarked for chips and semiconductors. So this is the breakdown. 39 billion will be for semicon fab, for foundry, some people call it. Over 5 years, 2 billion for the general chip industry, and then 11 billion for more research and development. So here is the breakdown on how they're going to spread out the money. So you can see in financial year 2020, that's where a big chunk of the money will begin, and then it'll be a slow taper off for the following 5 years or so. So to give a sense, you can see the US is pumping about 39 billion. The Chinese chip makers like SMIC, right, only wants to spend about 5 billion in terms of capacity expansion. But remember, the countries in this equation, in this discussion, is not just the US and China, right? There's also Taiwan and Samsung, which I'll talk a little bit about later on. So why is this also happening, right? If you look at this pretty cool report done by semiconductors.org, you can see when you look at the big players in the world like China, Taiwan, and South Korea, they either pump in a lot of money. In the case of China, they spent 50 billion over 20 years, or they give a lot of things like tax incentives and other manufacturing incentives. So for example, in Taiwan, you have 5-year tax holidays, you get infrastructure support, free infrastructure support, preferential loans, and things like that. Whereas when you compare it to the US, they basically receive no manufacturing subsidies, no tax incentives, and no manufacturing incentives for 20 years. And so the crazy bit is also this, right, in terms of the capacity, right? China has grown by the fastest, nearly 16%. Taiwan is at 6.5%, but of course on a very big base. And the US is like 2.2%. So, as to specifically why they are, not so, they are so bullish about this CHIPS Act, I'll explain a little bit later on. Right. So another important detail is that recipients, right, of these subsidies, right, 52 billion, they actually cannot expand production in China beyond a certain chips, right? The low end chips, no problem, but the more high end one, maybe your 7 nanometers and whatnot, and lower, they can't do it. And once they get it, they have to abide by this rule for 10 years. However, the interesting detail is that it will not apply to all facilities. So that's something to think about. So the whole idea for the US doing this is so that all the manufacturing and what we call semiconductor or technology independence will be retained in North America, right? Because right now the basic business model is, companies like Nvidia, Apple, they don't actually produce the chip, they design the chip, And so they have what we call a fabless model. And then all the fabrication is done in, especially the high-end chips will be done in majority Taiwan, and a smaller percentage in someone like Samsung in Korea. And so the US feels a little bit insecure about this. Now, why is the US doing this? One is to compete with China. Two is to solve a chip shortage problem. But I think the biggest one would be Taiwan. As much as the US government has indicated that they are supportive of Taiwan, they are worried that over time China may decide to invade Taiwan for whatever reasons, and they feel insecure about it. If 90% of advanced chips come from Taiwan, that means the US is also at a certain risk. And so that's why the US wants to bring back all this manufacturing onshore, onto their own shores, right? I think that's the biggest reason. So linked to that is also their chip manufacturing capacity. If you didn't know the history about chip making, the company that originates all of this is actually Intel. So the irony is that chip making actually came from the United States. And in 1990, they were 37% of modern chip manufacturing capacity, and today they are only at 12%. And of course, on the political front, such acts are described as opportunities to, bring jobs back to America. So, in that sense, Biden is not that different than Trump. So if you look at where the big manufacturing facilities are in Taiwan, what you see is that they're all very near the coast. So suppose if China were to invade, do an amphibious assault on Taiwan, these manufacturing facilities will get hit first. So that puts them in a very vulnerable position, and that puts the entire world in a vulnerable position, and the US is included in that list. So interesting fact, according to Reuters, the loss of a single year's output from Taiwan will bring the international electronic supply chain to a halt. So one tiny island will literally bring the entire world, right? Semiconductors are so important to all of us, and just 1 year's of output gone, and the whole world will have to shut down. Hey guys, enjoying the video so far? If the answer is yes, always remember to give the video a like and subscribe to our channel. Click on the notification bell so that whenever new videos come out, you'll know it right away. And of course, if you disagree with some of our points, just let us know in the comments. We're always interested to hear your feedback. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the spillover effects as a result of what the US has done. So I think the big one is this whole concept of deglobalization. I think over the past 20 odd years, we've had one of the, if not the most rapid pace of globalization in the world. And all of this means that supply chains are a lot more connected. And people or countries start to specialize, right? Like, for example, Taiwan don't design smartphones, right? They leave that to people like the US or Korea. But at the same time, people like the US don't focus on chip manufacturing. They leave that to Taiwan. And then even within Taiwan, they don't do everything to do with chips, right? They take, let's say, the cleaning of their chips and their semiconductors to someone like Frontken in Malaysia. And of course, Malaysia, with the exception of Silterra, don't go into foundry work. So you can see that over the past 20 years, at least before President Donald Trump, the world was very connected. Everybody did their own thing, and they did it best and to the most efficient. As a result, we had big booms in many, many different industries. However, with Trump and then now accelerating through President Biden, there's an attitude by the United States that all this represents insecurity for their own country. And what is going to happen is that other countries will look at this and they will also think, hey, if the US is doing it, why can't we do it as well? So you can see in a country like India, they have same attitudes towards wheat. Indonesia, palm oil. Malaysia, quote-unquote, chicken. But of course, the most intense of this is the United States. Part of it is simply because they are a very rich country and they are not as actually connected to the rest of the world with certain exceptions, of course. So this is going to be a big trend that will be happening, and I'm not sure if it will ever be reversed back to the original state, although I also don't want to say that it's going to be a pure deglobalization and every country is going to make everything by themselves. I don't think that will be the case, but certainly it won't be as connected as the future, as the past. So now there are some things to consider as well, right? The first is, the US can say that they want to go into, start building fabrication, semiconductor fabrication, manufacturing facilities, but it takes 3 to 5 years. So in that 3 to 5 years, right, guys like Taiwan, guys like Korea and China, they are going to be also far ahead already. So it's not going to be very easy, right? It's going to be difficult as well, because if you look at like how, in terms of Taiwan's technology, they are 10 to 15 years ahead in both, compared to China, which is the fast-catching competitor to Taiwan. Taiwan's 10 to 15 years in, not just in terms of technology, but also in terms of yield, right? Yield is just, when you make a lot of them, like how many of them becomes like functioning chips, right, on scale. Whereas in China, they are a little bit less behind when it comes to the technology. I think they are about 4 to 5 years behind Taiwan, but their yield part, they are quite far behind. So when you take all into account, they are roughly about 10 to 15 years behind Taiwan. And so if America is just getting into the space right now, I think it's going to be quite a challenge. And right now they have 0% share, right, in advanced chip manufacturing. Intel is trying to make a comeback, all right, as a former legend, but certainly that's not going to be easy. Now, another thing to consider, and this whole idea of getting people to build factories in the United States has been talked about for the past 3 to 4 years, right, especially under President Trump. And yet we don't hear too much noise about it, or rather any success. Like take for example TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Corporation, was asked to build manufacturing plants in the United States. I think today they're roughly at only like 1% of total capacity for the whole group. So it's really, really insignificant. And the big one is cost. Can the United States have the same kind of cost or lower than Taiwan or China? And some industry insights is that for every engineer that you hire for a fabrication plant, you need 4 technicians. So it's not purely automation, right? In this industry, you actually need quite a lot of people. So to give you a sense, right, when you compare Intel and TSMC, Intel has 121,000 employees and TSMC has 65,000. So roughly about half the amount Intel has, or Intel has double the amount TSMC have. Now you can look at the R&D expenses, which is the graph on top, right? Even though they are double the amount that TSMC have in employees, they are triple or quadruple the cost, right? So you can see from this alone, the cost is a lot higher already. And then if you look at selling, general and admin expenses, which is the staff costs and all that, they are also a lot higher versus TSMC, way more than 2 times. And I didn't put here the cost of goods sold, which is the raw material and all that. That's also about, minimum 2 times higher, 3 and maybe even 4. So really in terms of cost, it's going to be really, really difficult for the United States to compete, and I'm not sure how they're going to do it, quite frankly. Oh yes, one more thing. I actually did some math to look at whether or not it's how do I put it, whether or not it's going to be a good idea to just spend 52 billion for the United States. And as you can see with TSMC, right, they have about 72 billion in net property, plant and equipment. And they have been in the business for so long. They are the highest, the most efficient, the highest tech and all that. And they've already spent 72 billion, but the US only wants to spend 52 billion over 5 years. I don't think that's going to be enough. SMIC themselves got 16 billion already, which is in China. And Samsung has already earmarked to spend 146 billion in their chip making capabilities. So you can see the global players in the world are a lot more, and they are also spending a lot more than whatever subsidies they're getting. And a lot of these things here, I'm not including, for example, what Koreans or Chinese companies get from their own governments in terms of subsidies, right? From 2011 to 2021, I think Chinese companies receive 100 billion in terms of chip making subsidies from their own government. So I don't think 52 billion is enough. And of course, if there's a decoupling, right, it's going to be quite painful for the US as well, because, you know, China buys a lot of chips from the US as well. And it's going to hurt US companies, right? So that's not going to be fun. Alright guys, before I move on to the last segment of this video, I want to share with you that we are finally reopening our mentorship program. So if you want us to guide you one-on-one in your investing journey, we can have a chat over coffee. So just go into the comment section or the description, click on the Google form link, apply for it. Not everybody will get in, so please do give good answers, and looking forward to seeing you. Okay, finally, so let's talk about how does this actually affect you as an investor, right? So some companies that will be affected obviously are the major players, right? Guys like TSMC, Samsung, UMC, Global Foundries and all that. I actually think that it's not going to be that, it's not going to affect Taiwan or even Samsung or even SMIC that much, quite frankly. And so if this results in fear for all these companies, then if the price of the stock goes down, then that might be an opportunity for you to look at it and get excited about it. US companies, US companies, I think Intel is potentially the biggest winner, right? They will be able to, you know, get subsidies and build some of their plants. Intel themselves are already wishing to spend tens of billions to improve their own capacity with or without the subsidies, so it's certainly a help to them. However, they may have to think hard about how they navigate their foreign operations, because you know, now the US is not too favorable to foreign operations, especially in China. Guys like Micron will face the same thing, but thanks to, in response to this act, I'm not sure if in response or they already had it in their plans, they'll be making a 40 billion investments. So Micron is really pushing hard, especially in the memory space. Qualcomm and Global Foundries, they are going to be very limited, right? They're only 4 billion, so you can see they're not too excited about it. Nvidia, Broadcom won't really have effect. They're more into design, so you know, this is more physical, you know, more like hard economy kind of stuff. And then Lam Research, KLA, and Applied Materials definitely will be affected, as you know, in the case of Lam Research, they are very much linked to Taiwan Semiconductor, as we know from Frontken, and I don't think they'll be that affected lah, quite frankly. In terms of Malaysia, obviously Frontken, I think Frontken will pretty much remain the same, not much change. Potentially now with you know, the push to have you know, their own countries to have their own manufacturing capabilities, maybe, you know, Silterra, will they be our next quote-unquote proton in the semiconductor industry? You never quite know, but I won't rule that out. And if that is the case, you know, might be exciting for Silterra. As far as OSAT goes, you know, they are linked to a lot of these, some of these American companies like Inari, so they won't be affected, but they won't, I don't think they will be able to, what do I call it, take advantage, right, of this CHIPS Act, not too much anyway. You know, same for Getronic, ASM, AG, with, you know, that's linked to Apple and whatnot. Perhaps the ATE guys will be the one that benefits the most, because it doesn't really matter who creates these chips and whatnot, as long as everybody is creating chips and everybody needs testing of their chips, then the ATE and the testing guys will you know, be very, very happy. So as a conclusion, just to summarize everything I just shared with you, number one is that the world is heading towards protectionism. Now, I don't like extreme thinking. I don't think we're going to go back into, I don't know, the 1500s. But at the same time, I don't think we will be enjoying the same kind of supply chain fluidity as we did in the past. 20 years. Number 2 is Taiwan is unlikely to lose its status as a semiconductor leader. You know, both the US and China are very far behind. And apparently even TSMC can get US subsidies. So is it really an advantage to US companies? Well, perhaps, maybe just a little. Now, speaking of little, I believe that the US is not spending enough based on this CHIPS Act. 52 billion really is a drop in the, or say, okay, not say a drop in the ocean, maybe a bucket in the ocean. Compared to what TSMC already has, what they plan to spend, what, you know, China themselves getting, the companies receiving so much subsidies from China. So it's really not going to be that effective from my point of view. Really, it will be better off, but it's sort of like a 5-10% improvement kind of thing. So for US companies, this is very tricky because on one hand, yes, they can get subsidies, but they have to give up a lot of operations in China. Right, so I saw one analyst say that they will, for tens of billions, they have to give up hundreds of billions. Is that something that they really want to do? But I think as far as Malaysia is concerned, right, bar a few companies that can only be linked to, let's say, TSMC or linked to a particular company like Broadcom, let's say, Inari. If really the world starts to decouple and build their own foundries and do their own thing, I think Malaysia will stand a chance to benefit because now we get more options. Countries like maybe India that were not used to, that never built all these foundries, now decides to build. And so we have more options now who we want to supply our services to. So I think no matter what, Malaysian companies, you know, might be a boom actually. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you find this video very useful and if you think someone who would find this video very useful, please share it with them. Follow us on our social media, Instagram, Telegram, Facebook, and whatnot. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.